Welcome to the GovComms podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from experts and thought leaders around the globe in government communication. Now, here is your host, David Pembroke.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to GovComms, the podcast that examines the practice of content communication in government and the public sector. My name's David Pembroke. Thank you for joining me. Today, we speak to an old friend, Amanda Dennett. She is an experienced communication professional specialising in digital communication strategy, crisis and issues management. She's currently the head of digital experience at the Australian War Memorial, and she has been involved in some fascinating projects at the Australian War Memorial, and we will be speaking to her about those today. Amanda is completing a Master of Research at Swinburne University of Technology, where she's researching Australian government use of media to engage with citizens, and specifically social media. She's previously worked as a media advisor, led a government video production team, and implemented social media customer service at the giant Department of Human Services here in Canberra. She's passionate about the ethics of technology, galleries, libraries, archives and museums, known as GLAM, gender equality, and also sport. Amanda has a Bachelor of Communication in Journalism and a Graduate Certificate in Professional Writing from the University of Canberra, as well as a Bachelor of Research, an honours research degree from Swinburne University of Technology. She is currently completing a Master of Research at Swinburne University of Technology, where she is investigating that very point around public sector agencies and their use of social media to engage with citizens. And she is also the chapter president of the International Association of Business Communicators in Canberra. She joins me in the studio. Amanda Dennett, welcome to GovComms.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are lazy.
I know, I feel a bit tired after you read that out. I thought, it's not all happening at the same time.
But it's a mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a mindset of continuing to learn, to grow, which is really the essence of what people have to take on in this day and age, isn't it?
I think so. And just, I guess, having worked in a number of social media teams and having discussions with colleagues across government communication specifically, the same kind of issues and challenges pop up, and it was a really good opportunity to do some research and to learn more about that and to try to discover why.
Yeah.
But then also in the future, I'm keen to pursue that more and work out what recommendations can we make, what benchmarks can we set that help social media teams specifically operate the best way that they can within a government environment.
To make sure, though, that there's the discipline and the strength of the evidence base through research, and how do you build that structure and process into communication social media teams?
That's it. And as well as those frameworks, I think also giving teams the permission and the support that they need to get the resources and tools to deliver. And I think that can be a challenge. The passion and the willingness from teams is there, but not always the understanding within the organisation's context to give them that focus. So, I'd like to bring a bit of both.
But it's interesting, though, isn't it? Because really, and this is everywhere, data is becoming much more available, much more able to be explored for insight. And those mathematics skills are not traditionally found in communications teams. So what's your view on how that sort of quantitative research methods can be brought together to really start to build that capability that can deliver better insights, which leads to better content?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. So communications people aren't generally maths experts, and I'm certainly not. No. But so in my research, it came out really that teams have really different approaches across government to how they measure social media and its effectiveness. In particular, some don't do it much at all. Some do it in quite a reactive way, and that comes down to being busy. And others have, regular sort of weekly or monthly reports that they do, but they're not always sure why they're measuring it and necessarily what it's proving. So,
but are they measuring outputs as opposed to the insight that comes from that? They may know how many likes, views, shares, etc. they might have, but they don't actually know the why behind it.
I think that there's a mix. So that's the case certainly for some agencies, particularly where they're smaller. The feedback that I got, was that the smaller teams are doing some of that reporting, but not necessarily having the time to do the why. Others are more focused, and they've got a more developed, and a more developed capability. So in my research, I looked at 2 case study agencies, so the Australian Taxation Office and the Department of Human Services, which is now Services Australia. Because they're 2
big ones.
Yep, 2 big ones, and also 2 that have always been a bit sort of forward thinking on this stuff, particularly because they've got a demand from the Australian public. But then I also matched that with a survey of people who work in government social media teams across Australia. So I got 47 responses to that, so a smaller pool. But that ranged, so there were people that were in teams ranging from 2 to 25 people working on either just social or a mix of social and other types of media and communications work. So those experiences really varied. So some teams do some measurement, but don't always know why. Others, the bigger agencies, are really today quite skilled in understanding what trends in the kinds of responses that they see from the public mean in terms of their business, and they make really good decisions about how they change delivery, how they change messaging, or they use it to preempt potential issues in a way that's really powerful for their reputation. So I think we've got within government a broad spectrum of
That's
capability.
To be expected, I imagine.
And so I guess I was hoping to bring that out and then work out how we can, use the best practice to bring everyone else up.
So was your research just in Australia?
Yes.
Okay, and just at a federal level and a state level? Did you go down to local government as well?
No, I just did federal only.
Just federal only?
Yeah, and there's a bit of existing research in Australia on state and local government social media, but limited in federal. So that was my area of focus.
Okay, what are the keys to success to have a good social media presence? What did you find? What did your research find?
So it varied again, and I think it depends on the aims of the agency, which is kind of the comms initial question is, what are you hoping to get out of this work? But really, I think, aligning social media content with other forms of communication that you're doing. So, it's not its own channel that you need to feed separately. What you're doing there needs to be integrated with the rest of the strategy. I think having people with the appropriate skills and strategy understanding to deliver on social media work is essential. And I think, we've evolved from the point of people, who are perhaps younger and, a bit more tech savvy implementing this work, which was certainly the case when I first started doing this work, sort of back in 2009 or so. Is, hey, give that a go and see what you find out. I think we've evolved from that into having people that are delivering it as part of an integrated strategy. So that's really key to success. As well, I think appropriately resourcing it. So some of the challenges that came out were, that people might be part of a 2-person team that are responsible for media, social media, website publishing, and marketing campaigns. And that's really a challenging environment for any communicator. And so that, the social media posts sometimes become an add-on to people's work. So, there were pockets of best practice that came out of the research, but it definitely highlighted challenges. So I guess as a next step, I'd like to look at what can we do about those challenges across the board, because there are limited resources available.
Do you think that the leadership is coming to understand the importance of communication more, and therefore thinking more about investing in it, given the critical nature that it plays in explaining policy, explaining regulation, services, programs, etc.?
I do.
It's moving?
Yeah, I think it is. So I didn't get to speak to any senior leaders as part of my research. I wanted to focus on the practitioners, but I did ask them about what they thought their leaders thought of their social media implementation, to gauge that whether or not the permission of senior leaders gave them, or empowered them to deliver differently. And it did seem to have an impact. So people who were able to speak about having a leader that enabled them to come up with different ideas and to implement things in a way that was needed and that gave them the resources to dedicate time to that, were able to deliver things that on the surface seemed to be more innovative. And so that was really interesting. And some of it tells us things that we probably already know, but that sort of research didn't exist. And so I guess I wanted to capture that and put it on paper. And so, yeah, I think that there are more lessons for other agencies that are still risk averse. But certainly agencies where there are leaders who prioritise media and social media issues as a way to get a pulse on what's happening within the community and to shift a focus on services or problem solving as a result of that, had higher performing social media teams, or were creating an environment where more interactive social media could happen.
Now, in an earlier answer, you mentioned skills. What are the critical skills that people need to have to contribute effectively to a social media team?
So I asked that as well in my research about...
I'm doing my research.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So I did ask that because I wanted to gauge, what the area of focus is, but also whether or not that's changed. Because as I said, we have evolved from the young person looking after social media, and so I found that the skill sets of people within a team really changed the approach that the team took to their social media work. And that sort of sounds simple, but in teams where people had sort of a media background, the focus is in using social media for PR type purposes. There was an example through the ATO where the person who was leading the team came from a strong research and data insights background. And so I guess related to your previous question, they had a real focus on using data to drive their content because that's the background that their leader came from, and that was a really strong sense of we need to be able to demonstrate the value that we're providing. And then other teams, like for example at Human Services, where there was a move towards reskilling people from call centre backgrounds into answering questions on social media to do a social media customer service function, that changed the approach from being one about just communicating information and changes to one where you can actually receive customer service through that channel in a way that, was an attempt to help relieve pressure on call centre and face-to-face demand. So, that I was able to, demonstrate some of that, which again, we sort of think that makes a bit of sense, but you don't see it quite so clearly until you've, spoken to those teams and learned about their experiences. But it was interesting because alongside that, people really saw that resilience is a key skill that people needed to have, and it might be more of an attribute, but that was really important because the nature of the work and the fact that it can happen at any time of the day. And that you might be dealing with issues in real time that are quite sensitive. Resilience was really important. Good writing skills came out as a really important topic, and the attribute and the ability to tailor complex information to an audience in a way that's easy to understand. And those things were valued more highly than an in-depth understanding of the topic. Simply because social media workers need to be able to adapt in all environments and answer questions, on the fly. Good judgment came back as an essential skill and one that can be, potentially difficult to train. But the ability to identify issues early and escalate those within a team was really valued by people who responded to my survey and also the interviews that I did. So, those rated at the top, which aren't, they are sort of traditional comms skills and ones that we value highly. But, it sort of didn't come down to ability to write creative headlines. It really was resilience and judgment for social in dealing with real-time issues.
It was, and it's probably a couple of years ago now, but there was a period of time where that issue of resilience and the impact of running social media was quite a hot topic, particularly in government circles, where there was that concern around the welfare of people because of the demands. So it's still quite an important issue that people be aware. It's important that they be aware and be able to deal with that pressure.
It is. And I think part of that is the nature of busyness in communication teams within government, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing demands. So I remember at Human Services a number of years ago organising some resilience training for our social media managers, so that help them deal with difficult issues online, but also about managing self-care and helping other teammates. And that was really important because we would deal with issues at times online from people who were in really difficult situations. And, that's not necessarily something that people in comms roles are trained for.
Yeah.
So that was really essential. And I know now a number of companies, in Australia that do that sort of training for online community managers to help them deal with that. So, I think it has increased over time, or awareness of it has. And perhaps it's increased in instances simply because government's using it more day to day nowadays.
So what's the future, do you think, for social in government communication? Where does it sit in the mix of, there's the marketing campaigns, there's the ministerial responsibilities around, speeches and issues management, etc. Where does social land in the future?
I think, it's so, at the moment it's fully integrated and has been well adopted by government. So there's definitely a mix at the moment of where social media responsibility sits within an organisation. And I looked at that as part of my research. So does it align with media? Does it align with web publishing? Does it sit somewhere else? And
the answer was?
Well, a mix again. Rarely, so in only about 10% of cases did people work in a team that did social media alone. So that's still quite niche, and so people are doing that work alongside other teams. Social media,
but that makes sense, doesn't it? That you should do that. It really doesn't need to live by itself elsewhere.
And again, it sort of depends on the work of your agency and the aims. So social media customer service, I think, is an area that we'll continue to see growth in, and agencies are working out how, what model is going to operate best for them. And that's why I was keen to look at the ATO and Human Services because they both tackle that differently. So, what are the learnings from those two experiences? I do think that we're getting better, and that we will see more evolution in the integration of marketing across all channels. And I think at times social media still can be an add-on to a traditional marketing campaign. And so I think that that'll continue to evolve. Changes to how people interact with social media content with government has changed. I think it did used to be more passive. And anecdotally, I think now people are engaging with that content more, sharing it if it's relevant, and government's become a more credible online source of information within the social media context. So it's not really, boring content anymore. It's content that you might need. And I think COVID's provided a great example of that from a health perspective, that if the content is relevant to me, I'll share it, even if it's from the government. So I think that'll continue.
Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because the traditional, I suppose, meme around government communication was, well, people don't want to hear from us. They don't want to engage with us. They're not interested. Where in actual fact, it's quite the opposite. They do. But the task and the challenge for the government communicator is to make sure that they communicate in a way that is relevant and useful to the audience, but also is at the highest standards of design or innovation. So as it is good content that people want to take a look at.
That's right. And I think also, managing our own expectations as government communicators about what is meaningful to the public and what we might think of as a measure of success may not actually be the way that people need or want to get information from us, or it might sort of our own wishes for how our campaigns might run might overstate the willingness of the general public to, engage with government online. So I guess an example of that I have from early work in dealing with students online at Human Services was providing support to them through Facebook and Twitter, information on accessing student payments while you're at uni. Mm-hmm. And we would find this trend of people who would follow an account, ask us some questions. How do I claim youth allowance? What do I do? This has happened. How do I report employment income? And then and we were tracking our interactions as well as the number of followers that we had. And we noticed that despite an increase in engagement, we didn't have any increase in followers. And we noticed people would follow us, have the interaction, get what they need, and then unfollow. So they don't want to have their interactions with government on their Facebook profile.
Okay.
They used it at the time to interact with their friends. And so for us, that became we had to reframe what we thought success was. So providing that support in that environment in a way that helps someone so that they don't need to call is a good outcome. Mm-hmm. Even if we don't retain them as online followers, they know that we're there if they need us. Right. And so we had to reframe what we thought of as success for that type of interaction with that audience.
And is that still the case? That that they'll come in and then they'll go away because they don't want to be seen to be talking to the government?
I'm not sure today. Right. So this was some sort of years ago now. Yeah. But that for me was my first kind of realisation moment about the way that people want to deal with government is different to how government might think that should occur, and that was a good example. So I don't know if it's changed today, and probably students are using Facebook less and they're hanging out elsewhere. But I guess it gives us it gave us pause to think, what is the measure of success? What are we hoping to achieve? And actually, that was a really legitimate outcome for the effort that we were putting in.
Yeah, excellent. Now, listen, your day job at the moment is that you are the head of digital experience at the Australian War Memorial, and you've been, as I say, when we last caught up, I was fascinated by some of the work that you were doing out there, which I thought was just really right on the edge of it all and making it happen. Perhaps for the audience, which is a global audience, maybe just, if you would, just describe the Australian War Memorial and what it is and what you're doing there as the head of digital experience.
So the Australian War Memorial is a museum. And we pride ourselves on being a world-class museum that's dedicated to telling stories about Australia's military history. We're also an archive, so we hold thousands of records and collection items that help tell that story. And we're a shrine. So at the centre of the memorial is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is a really sacred place at the memorial, but also in the hearts of Australians, really, when it comes to commemoration about those who've served in war and conflict and those who perhaps haven't returned home. So it's been really exciting, actually, to be able to work there the last couple of years and deliver some engaging interactive experiences and to work on virtual reality and interactive 360 content in a way that I haven't experienced before. So it's been great. I've been able to lead those projects and definitely learn on the job as well. So one example is a virtual reality experience that we delivered for the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Hamel. So it was in the First World War. On the 4th of July, it was the first time that Australians and Americans had fought side by side. It was in France, and we decided to use virtual reality to immerse people in that time on the battlefield and to get a small window into what it may have been like to be there at that time. And that's a really difficult ask, to do that in a way that is respectful and has an appropriate tone of learning and education and commemoration rather than having a video game style element, which I think virtual reality can stray into that quite easily if you aren't sort of focused on the outcome. And so we decided to use an artwork from our First World War galleries as the inspiration for that. And so we immersed people in the battlefield, but they felt as though they were in a painting and experiencing that through the stories of and diaries and letters of people who were there. So that was really successful. We delivered.
So that was an
on-site.
experience delivered on site at the museum. So to get that experience, you had to go to the memorial here in Canberra.
Yep. So you could come in person, and we had up to 50 people in a theatre session at a time. But you can also, you can Google the Battle of Hamel VR. The Australian War Memorial, and it's available on YouTube as a 360 video, so you can watch one of those experiences. And we've got a couple of others we're working on that, so that we're hoping to release it as an app where you can view all of these if you've got a headset at home.
What's your view on AR and VR? Are we too soon? As a consumer, certainly in the museum context and environment, I think it's applicable because you can control the environment, etc. But as a more general platform delivered more widely and more broadly, where do you see the maturity of AR and VR, and what should people be looking at or staying attuned to so as that they know when they really could start to integrate it into some of their work?
I think for virtual reality, one of the limitations has been the cost of hardware to purchase and use at home. So the prices have come down significantly in a way that makes it more accessible to people. But as with anything, the driver of adoption is, the quality of content that you can get there. So streaming services have exploded because, there's a massive back catalogue of things that we want to watch on demand, as well as, new things coming out all the time. And I think VR's been in a difficult point where perhaps the hardware's been too expensive so that people haven't invested a lot in content. But now that the hardware's come down in price, there is more content being made, but it's expensive to produce. So if there's not an audience there, people won't spend money creating content. So it's sort of caught in a bit of a cycle of, what's going to go first.
Does 5G solve that? Does 5G, start to accelerate the adoption curve because, of the ubiquity, cloud, greater connectivity, faster speeds? I
think potentially, yeah. At any time that there's that type of advancement, it really helps. But I think for us, the cost of creating some of these things and for other organisations and government more broadly, the cost of investing in VR is quite high compared to general video production. Yeah. And so I think that that's going to be a barrier for the foreseeable future. For AR, I think that's got many more applications, and we'll start to see that explode in the coming years because we now have, in our hands, pockets, a device that enables us to use AR within the world, and there are some great examples of it through gaming specifically that are already giving people, they're increasing people's comfort level with using AR. So that's an area that we're looking to explore next. We haven't really done AR yet, but we're quite keen to find some opportunities for that. So keep an eye on the War Memorial's AR. Hopefully we come up with something soon.
Listen, before I let you go, you're also the president of the Canberra chapter of that wonderful organisation, the IABC, the International Association of Business Communicators. I think you've got the job for a year. What are you hoping to achieve in that year, and what does the Canberra chapter need to help to continue to grow and mature the profession?
This year has been such an interesting one to be president of IABC. So I'm really fortunate because we've got a good board of engaged people, so a volunteer board of communication professionals that are really invested in expanding the comms network in Canberra. And I think I first joined IABC in Victoria for that reason, to try to meet other people who did the job I I did, but without necessarily talking to the same people at work that I talk to every day. I wanted to expand. And so when I moved back to Canberra, I moved my membership to Canberra and immediately found a new network of people. So I think that's the strength of this type of organisation. So we're keen to continue that this year. We've been trying to do that through online events. We took our midweek mingle drinks, which we do every month or two at a bar. We moved those online so you could bring a virtual wine and have a chat, and that worked really well. But what we're looking to do this year, our key focus is on certification. So we're going to hold our first ever certification exams here in Canberra. So what that involves is we're going to mentor people in Canberra to do the
Gold Quill.
Well, no. So that the Gold Quills are our awards.
Awards. Okay. There's additional certification.
Yeah. So that it's done by the Global Certification Council, which was an IABC initiative early on, but is now an independent body. So you don't have to be a member to achieve certification. But what we're hoping to do is, I guess, give independent recognition to professional communicators for their skills and knowledge in the way that accountants have a certification, HR professionals might have a certification. We wanted to bring that to communications professionals in Canberra. So we've already got a couple. I think we've got 3 in Canberra already, and we've got about half a dozen that are keen to sit this year, including me. So hopefully I pass in October. There's
a lot of work to get certification?
Well, it's actually, it's 2 things. So you need to be able to give evidence of your experience in communication. So if you've been working in the field for a number of years and you've been advising to clients or senior managers, then you'll be right. And you need to provide that evidence and paperwork, but you've already done the work in your career, so it's giving evidence of that.
Exam.
Well, you do as well. So the second part is an exam, which we're hosting in October, and it's an online exam, and it really tries to measure your depth of knowledge. So you can do some preparation, and there's some practices, but most of it is just drawing on the expertise that you've throughout your career. So.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I think certification is important, and we can go down that path in another conversation that I'm sure we will have down the path, because I think that notion of a profession is very important to build, and certification is obviously a key part of that as well. And I think, mobility, I think it enables all sorts of things, including mobility. And I think, one of the great lessons of COVID inside the Australian Public Service has been that ability to activate and for people to be mobile, but it would be even enhanced further if, outside of a crisis, if mobility and certification could help to, move people around more effectively and where their needs are and where their skills will be recognised and acknowledged. So,
and I think when it comes to whether you're a consultant in government, working in an organisation, a lot of discussion is about getting comms, a seat at the table when it comes to decision making.
Out of the colouring in department.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that certification provides that public acknowledgement of your experience in a way that's undeniable, and helps to elevate the profession. So, How
can people find out a little bit more about that certification?
So visit iabccanberra.com. Or Google GCCC, which is the Global Certification Council through IABC.
Okay, excellent. Amanda, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Really enjoyed the conversation. I'll let you get back to all of these busy things that you are doing in your career. But ladies and gentlemen, what a fascinating conversation there from one of the outstanding communication professionals, not just here in Australia, but I think globally. There's no question that Amanda's skills are right up there, and her experience through many, many roles over time, and to be involved in research. I think that's, it's what we need more of. We need more interest and involvement, more understanding, so we can become more effective in the roles that we play. But fantastic for Amanda to come in today, and thanks to you for coming back once again. I'll be back at the same time next week with another fascinating guest, but for the moment, it's bye for now.
You've been listening to the GovComms podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.